And there are countries like Zambia and Malawi that have shown the past few years that if there is a deliberate policy to increase food production, also these poor countries can manage. They have managed and they are exporting food now in comparison to a few years ago. Whereas other countries like Zimbabwe and other African countries that in the past have been exporting food are not doing that anymore. The biggest problem, the second point, is MDG 8. MDG 8 has an additional problem because it's the only MDG that hasn't a target. So rich countries are not bound to achieve something. And the things that have been agreed in the years after 2000, because of pressure of civil society globally, and particularly also in the North, have set some targets, but the targets are soft compared to the targets that have been agreed, the hard targets that have been agreed on the other 7 MDGs for the developing countries. As you know, in 2005 there was an enormous investment by civil society campaigning together with celebrities like Bono and Bob Geldof, etc. Whatever you think of the contribution of these people, they have highlighted in particular towards the international media and the broad public also the interest in the MDGs. So we have, and I personally consider it as an important contribution to the broad interest in the MDGs. We know that in Gleneagles at the G8 and later on confirmed by the Millennium Plus 5 Summit in September 2005, plus also in the EU meetings in that year, there have been set targets that weren't, in our opinion, not ambitious enough, but were already quite good. And if those governments that have made those commitments would have complied the years after 2005 with those commitments, we would have been quite far in getting money going to develop to the poorest countries to achieve the MDGs. Unfortunately, in 2006 and 2007 we have seen, and there's just a very good report out on this by Concord, written by Eurodat and other European NGOs that have assessed per country how far, to what extent rich countries, G8 countries, but also other countries are complying with the commitments they have made since 2005 and actually already before in 2000. And we see that in particular on aid there is a shameful non-commitment of the rich countries. And not just the US, but Italy is a shame, France is not complying, and Sarkozy has recently proposed that the target set by France to make it to 0.7% of GDP as foreign aid by France should be postponed to 2015. So there are all kinds of efforts made by northern governments to escape from the commitments made in 2005. Also the UK actually that led the Gleneagles Summit isn't complying with the commitments. Germany made some progress, and in Europe actually only the Nordic countries, the Netherlands, and we must say Spain, they are doing quite well. Spain is the country with 33% in 2007, increasing its foreign aid, that had the best performance. On debt, the foreign debt of developing countries, which was one of the targets, some progress has been made. 23 of the poorest countries are benefiting of it, but it's not good enough yet. There are about 60 countries that should benefit from the debt agreement that has been made between the rich countries and the poor world already since the mid of the 1990s. And we're still waiting for real progress on this. Some progress has been made. I saw you didn't mention it in your presentation, but I saw in your handout That on that, if you compare it to what has been achieved on trade and on aid, then on that the most progress has been made indeed, but still not good enough. And if of the 50 billion additional dollar that was promised to Africa by the year 2010 by the rich countries in Glen Eagles, we already predicted 2 years ago, 2 years ago, no, last year was it, in 2007, we saw that rich countries would fail with 30 billion to make that target. And now the OECD has itself confirmed that the rich countries fail to make that target with $34 billion. So of the 50 billion that was promised, only 16 will be compliant with, which is a big disaster. On the debt issue, I still need to say, and many people know that Iraq and Nigeria, for different political reasons, were the major beneficiaries of the debt cancellation towards the south, and the smaller bits went to the poorest countries in Africa. On trade, the disaster is even bigger. Mr. Roscoe mentioned already the EPAs, which the Economic Partnership Agreements Europe is trying to impose now on many countries, both in Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. This is to repair actually what has gone wrong in the Doha development trade round in the context of the WTO. And yeah, behind the back door, Europe is trying, and also the US is trying, to make bilateral agreements to impose on developing countries a kind of trade regime that is in some respect maybe positive, but in many respects negative. For instance, it imposes liberalization of economies of developing countries, of the poorest countries, that will be devastating to protect some of their industries and agricultural efforts and efforts to export to the north. The US is not doing much better. The farm bill that was just agreed in Congress and the Senate of $289 billion is in fact increasing subsidies to farmers in the US, with a devastating impact on farmers in the south. Okay, well, this overall picture is not very promising. The commitments that have been made in 2000 and reconfirmed in 2005 will not be achieved. We will do everything as civil society, together with, we hope, migrant organizations